We just had a news in 90 seconds, and we heard about Dr. Faith B.Yisrael, her views on the neonatal issues in Trinidad, Port of Spain, right? But she's here to speak to us on a more exciting note this morning. Welcome, Dr. Faith B.Yisrael.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. It's wonderful being here this morning.
For those of you joining, she is the Secretary of Health, Wellness and Social Protection. She'll be chatting with us about the Climate, Heat and Health workshop that took place in Kingston, Jamaica from the 16th of April to the 18th. So how was this experience overall for you?
Certainly, it was relatively new to me. Because it was something that I had never thought of as being as important as it was. So let me explain what this workshop was about. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is a part of the federal system in the United States that is responsible for giving like weather warnings and that kind of thing, has a project where they are working with various countries, various areas, to ensure that we know when there are issues relating to heat. I mean, we are all experiencing the days feeling
that sun is
very,
drastic.
very hot.
Yes.
Exactly, we are actually feeling that there is a difference.
Change, yes.
So what they are doing is helping us work through how to identify that difference. So we're working with meteorologists and climate scientists and so forth, but ensuring that the information that they provide, which is very technical most of the time, we don't understand what they're talking about, allowing us to be able to translate that information to one where the other stakeholders know what we're talking about and can act accordingly.
Now, I know this panel is a part of the climate heat control. As you said, we're feeling the effects of the sun, etc., etc. All right, and we were privileged in the form of Dr. Yisrael to be on that panel for that event. So we're asking you, what exactly is the Prepare Plan? We know that this is a part of that plan. So tell us a little bit about that.
Certainly. So on at that panel specifically, we had individuals talking about the different aspects of what we should be looking at. I focused on policy and what policy needs to include and how policy needs to be developed, which includes looking realistically at the resources on the ground. Because, you know, very frequently we write these policies, these documents, and then they get stuck in a cupboard somewhere, in a pile somewhere, and they are not used. So the aim of what I focused on at that point was to highlight that we need to be very realistic in what these policies are. We need to ensure that when we are working towards implementing them, we take all of the stakeholders on board because they are critical to the actual implementation. And that we have the resources, including the financial resources, because in many of the communities that we are dealing with, we have very limited financial resources, and this may not be at the top of the priority list to spend money on. So we have to be careful with that.
Okay, so I mentioned that it is the Prepare Plan, but I did not brief our viewers on what Prepare is. So it's the President's Emergency Plan for Adaptation and Resilience that they are putting together.
Exactly.
Yes. So while on this panel, what are some of the solutions that came about in combating this issue?
Now, the thing that we highlighted several things. The good thing is that there are countries who've actually gone ahead and have implemented quite a bit of this. So we were not starting from scratch. And I wanted to highlight the fact that Senegal, for example, in Africa, is one of the countries that have already started doing this work. And we were kind of looking at what they are doing, for example, and modeling after that. So what does that mean? It means that we were looking at what the warning system should look like. We know, for example, when there's a hurricane coming, you hear hurricane watch, hurricane warning, you know, that kind of stuff. We even identify the fact that most people don't even know the difference between a watch and a warning, and you're not sure which is which.
That is true.
So we probably should not be using those kinds of words. So, you know, those are the kinds of conversations we were having. We kind of ended up with this idea of using terms that were more distinct. So if we're talking about it being fine, we know that is a 0. If we're talking about it being a little warmer than it needs to be, if we're talking about it being dangerous, when you hear the word dangerous, you know. If you hear very dangerous, you know, well, take cover kind of thing.
Yes.
So, and we were looking at what colors, for example, we would use for each of those levels.
Well, I know that we have the yellow and the orange level and the red level. I was just about to ask you about that. Is it that you all are going to replace that system, or you all are going to improve the system?
So the idea is to look at that and to improve on it. We were even looking at, for example, the yellow versus the red versus the orange. For somebody who is colorblind, or whether they even look different on a gray scale kind of thing. Other than that, though, outside of what the warning says, we were also very careful to understand what each warning level means for us.
Yes.
So, for example, if we're talking about the yellow, you know, so it's just kind of warm, it's hotter than we normally are, but it's not too bad. It means that you, as the individual, you need to hydrate some more. You need to wear clothes that, you know, maybe a hat, stay inside if you have air conditioning and that kind of thing. We also highlighted, though, that there were other stakeholders that needed to be a part of that discussion in order to actually get the kind of results that we're talking about. What do I mean by that? As Secretary for Health, Wellness and Social Protection, for example, I would need to be able to say to the Tobago Regional Health Authority, we have this warning, it's going to be really hot, which means that today, but not just today, over the next 2 or 3 days, you may actually find more people coming into the hospitals, coming into the health centers for heat-related illnesses.
Yes.
So they need to be on alert that, okay, somebody coming 2 days from now means that it is the heat from 2 days ago that has caused them to come into the hospital now, and what do you need to do? Same thing applies possibly for the Secretary for Education, for example.
Schools.
It is going to be so hot that it may be worth not having school that day, because most of our schools are not air conditioned. You know what I mean? So it is having those kinds of conversations, given where we are. And given that we are Caribbean, you know, we normally think about the Caribbean is warm anyway. And we also have the history of not paying very close attention to what the weatherman says. It is also includes, shifting that kind of thinking to say, well, you know, when the weatherman say it's gonna be hot, it's gonna really be hot. So take heed.
Because I know in foreign, you know, they would normally look at the weather to know whether or not to send children to schools because it's snowing. But in the Caribbean, I see that there's a shift from the snow to the heat.
Exactly.
So you are saying that there are possible plans that would be implemented to have some measures put in place so that children would be able to learn on the online platform while this scourge, I should say, is going on.
Exactly.
So what is the main goal of Prepare?
The main goal is to get to a place where every country understands what its process is, understands what its warning system is like, understands who needs to kick in. So what is the mechanism for responding once the warning message has gone out, and that we are able to respond. The other part, though, which is something that we need to think about critically, is not just responding when it happens, but start actually redesigning how we build our communities,
So
for example, a proactive approach to it. So let me give an example. At my home, for example, I recently had, because it was just ridiculously hot, I called a contractor to say, okay, it's really hot. What can we do? I know the easiest thing is to put in an AC, but you know that also goes into the whole climate change. It's costly and that kind of thing. What can we do? And the person actually said to me, you know, they're actually insulating things that you could put on the roof. And they came, they lifted the galvanized or whatever is up there, put this layer of protective insulating material, put back down the galvanized, and the house was immediately cooler. And that says something about how we build, because having spent 10 years in the US, I know that when we talk about insulation, we are talking about insulation from cold.
Yes.
It never dawned on me that we could do insulation in the Caribbean from heat. So it is that kind of thinking and that kind of re-engineering how we deal with these things that would help us to treat with it in the future, but allow us to, in the now, figure out what we need to do as well.
All right, this was a lot of information, but we thank you so much for coming and share it with us. As we close, I want to ask you, how do you plan on implementing these plans?
So the good thing is that the team that went included key stakeholders from Trinidad and Tobago, included representatives from the meteorology departments and so forth in Trinidad, where we are going to continue working together to actually implement these things, because the warnings need to come from the Met Office, for example. And because we already worked on this thing kind of collaboratively, it really is a matter of just fine-tuning and having this be our policy going forward so that we can implement it nationally. And I am hoping that that happens relatively soon. So hopefully you would be seeing, those heat warnings come out, and they look a little different from how they were before, because we've done this work.
All right. So you mentioned that we have a lot to look forward to in terms of the implementing of these plans, in terms of looking more at our meteorological centers, because this is where the information will be coming from. So as you go forward, as we close, of course, where do we find more information about this and stay up to date in the plan progress?
Certainly. Well, one of the things you can do is search NOAA. NOAA, that gives you information about the thing. You could actually do a Google of the Prepare Heat Health, HEAT dash health. Oh my God, I don't know how to spell health.
That's okay. That's okay.
And you will get more information there, and we will work out whether we will do like a communications plan coming specifically from Trinidad and Tobago, but it may not be necessary to do it specifically for Trinidad and Tobago, since it was a regional thing, and a lot of the other countries are also going to be running in the same direction, so we could decide regionally, this is how we are going to be doing this.
All right, thank you so much. So I will look forward to the implementing of these plans, because it is getting hot.
It is.
And we really do need to figure out how we will combat this heat. So thank you so much, Dr. Faith B.Yisrael, for joining us this morning. For those of you viewing, this was Dr. Faith B.Yisrael, or Secretary for Health, Protection and Social Preparedness. Wellness.
Yes.
My apologies. I ask you to stay tuned and share the live.
Thanks for favor to wake up and hear me.